Do not buy the spin that the government has no role whatsoever when it comes to inflation, because that's just not true. There's one thing that is causing huge inflation problems.
His name is Anthony Albanese.
And it's 100% the government's fault.
That's my style. I hope you've noticed that.
And it's 100% the government's fault. That's immigration. You see, the busier our streets get, the busier our suburbs get. That is because the Australian population is growing at a particularly fast rate right now, and that is only happening because this government is importing the best part of 2,000 people a day.
Welcome to Australia.
That is a decision by this government. That is an inflationary decision made by the Immigration Minister, Andrew Giles. And that is because all of the people who put the federal budget together say you've got to tip in more people, even though more people, less houses pushes up things like housing demand and many of those other things that I just pointed that lead into inflation. Well, interestingly here, again, don't trust me, let's have a look at what John Keogh had to say in the Financial Review. Migration is a link to inflation. So when the government says it's all global, it's garbage. They are in charge of how many people are being brought into the country every day. The arrival of almost 500,000 migrants over the past year is adding to inflation, with influence on the Reserve Bank of Australia's decision when it comes to rate rises. A former RBA economist says the migration surge is added to rent prices and total consumer spending, HSBC chief economist has told the Fin Review. While working migrants reduce labour shortages in sectors such as hospitality and dampened wage pressures, economists believe that, at least in the short term, the net effect of the large migration influx is higher inflation. Don't trust me, don't trust the Financial Review. Well, OK, what about a government apologist over on taxpayer television? Ian Verondon wrote this for the ABC's website in the past couple of days, even though it comes with a juicy little caveat, despite the fact that he argues against himself in his own article. But here we go. All those people arriving need somewhere to live, and the increased demand is driving rents higher. Rent is part of what we count with inflation. More people, fewer places, higher rents is part of the calculation of inflation. The problem is likely to compound into the future. It takes years to build a house or a block of units, then consider the vast number of builders who've gone bust and the new dwelling approvals that this year have slumped to decade lows, partly because of
Anthony Albanese.
Because of soaring interest rates. Now, this is the bit where, of course, he doesn't get lynched while he's leaving the building. This is not and should not be an argument against immigration, multiculturalism, race or diversity. It's an issue that revolves around simple arithmetic. Well, nice try, Ian, but the reality is the main point you made is the point that is pushing up rents, which are part of the cost of housing, which is part of the cost of inflation. The government decides how many people come in. So all of this, again, is to drive home the point. Do not buy the spin that the government has no role whatsoever when it comes to inflation, that it's all to do with Israel versus Gaza, that it's all to do with Ukraine versus Russia.
It's because of Russia. Russia.
Because that's just not true. Again, we continue here. Another example about how hard it is to rent in Australia right now. Tenants are apparently being forced to pay up to $500 for a room in someone else's house.
That's outrageous.
In the new flatmates.com survey of more than 10,000 Australians, 48% of renters stated their main reason for living in share accommodation is they can no longer afford to live alone. In Melbourne, one room in someone else's house. In St Kilda, it'll cost you $490. In Armidale, $400. In Collingwood, $400. In Paran, $400. In St Kilda East, $400. And it goes on and on and on.
Yes, it goes on and on.
Now think about this right now. In Queensland, there are people that are dying because there are not enough hospital beds and there are not enough ambulances to answer when 000 rings.
This is the sort of Queensland I want. I want to preserve our lifestyle. I want to see Queenslanders being kept safe.
Yet the endless plan of the big end of town and government is to add more people to the issue. Government turns around and puts out a shiny video every now and then that, OK, they might open an extra wing of a hospital here or there.
I absolutely believe that Queenslanders deserve good health services no matter where they live. My government made a commitment to build this new hospital, and today we deliver.
But unless you're actually building something that is appropriate for the population, not just today but into the future, the problem will continue. The Queensland Government is making decisions about what to do with its money. They are deciding to knock down the Gabba for the 2032 Olympics. They are choosing not to hire more ambulances. They are choosing not to build more hospital beds. They are choosing not to increase their health capacity because their assumption is that as a voter, if it's somebody else that dies in the back of the ambulance, you won't care because they're not a member of your family.
Shame, shame, shame.
Well, I trust that Australians can see what's happening here and will make the right decisions about governments that want to take care of everyone and keep those numbers down as low as possible. And by the way, that story in Queensland, it ain't a one-off. More than 20, almost 30 people have died since the last election in exactly the same circumstance. Don't forget, in Victoria, 33 people died because the 000 system didn't work.
I didn't think it was appropriate.
Yet we keep rehiring the same people who don't spend the money or make everything worse. Again, on population, let's have a look here at where we're going to be going by perhaps as late as 2070, but certainly within definitely our kids' or grandkids' lives. As you can see there, the very top, the dark blue line, is the high series of immigration, and that's basically the path that we're on right now. That means that we hit 40 million about 2063. Now, that's the predictions. You hit 45 million, so you're growing at an even faster rate, less than 10 years later. If we stop immigration completely, well, then our population starts to hold for a very long time and then it starts to drop off. Now, nobody's saying no to any form of immigration, but you see the great difference between the super priming that's happening now, which takes us to 45 million, versus a little bit that takes us to 2071 before we get to 30 million people, as opposed to 45 million people by 2071. These are all big issues and these are all things the government controls.
So it doesn't matter where you live in Queensland, our priority is to make sure that you get good, decent health services. And of course, our priority has been to keep Queenslanders safe, and that is exactly what we have done and will continue to do.
As Prime Minister, I will always accept responsibility for the decisions I've taken.